to be on cocaine to be on this podcast? Cocaine. Cocaine, really? Cocaine. Cocaine, really?
What is up, everybody? You're listening to yet another edition of Cocaine Willie, the official K-State representative on the College Huddle. I am your commissioner, Bob Trollsby, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, the good chef, Andre Napier, and Fireball Matt Marchesini. And tonight we are talking basketball, and we have some good and some bad and some ugly to talk about. But before we get into the episode, we want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Anime's Parlor. I don't have a beer right now because it's 4 o'clock Mountain Time, but this beer crack, LaCroix crack, and you're on mute, is brought to you by Anime's Parlor, located at 616 North 12th Street in the heart of Aggieville in Manhattan, Kansas. Anime's has been in business for 50 years and is an absolute must-visit destination in Aggieville on game days and school nights alike. Anime's is our favorite, collectively, destination in Aggieville, and we always make a point to go visit our auntie every time we come back to the Little Apple. And they feature a wide variety of craft cocktails, draft beers, and everything in between, along with entertainment like live music, comedy, and all sorts of other events every single week. And if you catch the other podcast we drop this week, you'll have a list of some of those events. But if you don't catch that podcast, you can see that list at www.animes.com to get the full list of those events. They're doing cool stuff all the time. It's one of the coolest places to go in Aggieville. Go visit your auntie at 616 North 12th Street in the heart of Aggieville, and be sure to tell them Cocaine Willie sent you. All right, guys, let's start with the good. Let's start with the women's basketball team. They are 15-1 heading into this week, 3-0 in conference play for the women. For whatever reason, they started conference play like a few days before the men's team did, maybe a full week before. But they torched Texas Tech, who I think all three of us thought was going to be a little bit more of a heated battle going into that matchup than it ended up being. It was a tough game also for a good chunk of that game, but K-State ended up pulling out the victory, beat them by 20. They've beaten every conference opponent so far through the 3 games that they've played by 17 or more points. Ayoka Lee is having a lights out season so far and only playing 2/3 of every game. She's leads the team in average points per game with 19 and a half, or no, hold on. I think she's averaging 19 and a half minutes per game, but is averaging like 17 points per game on average, and leads the team in points per game, rebounds per game, field goal percentage, and blocks on 19 and a half minutes per game, which is wild to me. Serena Sundell, second in points, first in assists, third in rebounding. And we have matchups against number 22 Utah, which will be Tuesday, January 8th. I think I'll switch up the order. I'll probably drop this
Wednesday.
Yeah, duh. Today's the 6th. We're gonna drop this probably tonight or tomorrow. So January 7th. So that'll be the first game that you have. And then the second game will be at BYU on Saturday, January 11th. So what are you guys looking for from this road trip? Going back-to-back games on the road in the state of Utah, one against a Utah team that's pretty salty, ranked 22nd in the country, pretty solid team when you look at the Big 12. And there's not a ton of ranked teams in this Big 12 right now on the women's side. What are you thinking about this road swing, and how are you feeling about the team after the first 16 games of play?
I'm honestly excited that a team is living up to expectations. It's funny that you can critique this team and it's just the most petty things in the world that you can possibly find. I mean, we have a player on the team in Serena Sundell who's leading the nation in assists. I mean, that is just, and you're not even having to play your star players the entire game. I mean, this last game was a little dicey through halftime and all that, but when you eke out a team and you still beat them by 20 points, that's a beautiful thing. That's the sign of a dominant team. I really want them on this road trip to really come out and prove their dominance, because what's going to happen is we're starting to play I think once you get past this road swing, I think we're starting to play for that seeding across the national conferences. And you've got to win some of these tough games because, like you said, Bob, there's not a ton of really, really high ranked teams in the conference. So you kind of have to, skull drag some of these teams that are towards the bottom, even if it's on the road. So, but in terms of the team, happy with the team. Everybody's relatively healthy, not having to play a ton of minutes from Ioka Lee. That's really the woman that you're looking for the most in terms of her load of managing, her being the number one. And when you've got Serena Sundell coming in, I'm really ecstatic about her stats and the player that she's become this year.
Well, she's been a great player for us if you think about it for a long while now, but she's really developed her game to be one of the best point guards in the country, which is great to see. Obviously, you mentioned that she's the nation's assist leader, but also, and just something that you can always be impressed with her is, I mean, she's an excellent defensive player, great from a blocking perspective as a point guard, just because of her length. But she does a great job and has continued to do a great job in making others around her better, which ultimately the point guard is really the quarterback of the entire team. If you have a quarterback that's making everyone else better, then you're doing a really good job in your role. So a couple other players just to think about. So Taryn Sides is another player who has really developed from her freshman season last year into right now. She is the nation's third best 3-point shooter. She's shooting over 50% this season, averaging about almost six 3-point attempts a game, which is extremely important because for her last season, she showed a lot of promise in the non-conference schedule, but then when we got to conference play, she was showing why she was a true freshman. She was needing to develop on the defensive side of the ball and was very much last season a defensive liability, to where now she's able to come off the bench and not just excel from an offensive perspective, but she's really held her own here early on in Big 12 play. She's playing about 23 minutes a game, definitely seeing an improvement from her. Ioka Lee, we could talk about her from, leading the team in points. She's averaging 17 points a game on 19 minutes a game. She really hasn't been put in a position this season to where she's had to just completely, play in a majority of these games. I mean, in the last 5 games, she's played 20. The most she's played is 26 minutes, and that was against New Mexico State. In Big 12 play, the first 3 games this season, she played 17 minutes against Texas Tech, 27 against Houston, 24 against Cincinnati. Like, she's not even having to totally exert herself in a lot of these games because the offensive efficiency has been so good across the board. This game on Wednesday is a huge test for this team because in the first game on the road against Houston, they sleptwalked through that game and really had to come on, just like in most of their games this season. They come on in the second half, or I guess, from a quarter perspective, they come on in either the second half or the fourth quarter and just completely demolish the other team. Utah is going to be a really tough out for them on Wednesday. They went on the road yesterday to Ames in Iowa. I believe they beat Iowa State by like 3 points, etc. It might have been 5 points. One important thing for Utah, they had a player, I believe the one who made one of the big threes. They won by 8. Is that what you said? Okay. They had a player who made one of the late threes, I believe, who got hurt at the end of that game, who is one of their top players. This is going to be a very tough game for K-State. If they can go on the road against Utah, a team that I think is going to be a top 25 team the rest of the way this season, I think that's just going to show how much this overall team has developed from last season going into this season. One of the key things is who's going to be the scorers, especially in games on the road, who's going to be the scorers and are they going to play good defense? The Houston game isn't necessarily going to prove a lot of that, but the Utah game is going to prove a lot of that for the rest of the season. So Jeff Mitty's done a really, 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 really good job with this team because it isn't about Ayoka Lee as much anymore. He did a really good job in the transfer portal and picking up two really, really good ladies who have showed, they deserve the minutes that they get. And then he's obviously showing on the recruiting trail some really good players coming in. But he's coached these women together to just show improvement in these games. And so this is only going to get better for us as we go throughout the season. I'm excited for when they play TCU. That's going to be a huge game at home. They get TCU once this season. They get West Virginia, I believe, twice this season. And then they get Iowa State, who has not been super impressive to start off the year, but I think is also going to be a team that comes on later in the year. But Jeff Mitty has got these ladies doing everything right for right now.
And Iowa State, real quick on that point, Audie Crooks is probably the best matchup for Yoki that we've seen, and of any of the women's teams that we've probably played in the last couple of years since we've had her. So they're going to be a tough out regardless, just because she can go and do the same shit that Yoki's doing on a night in, night out basis.
Yeah, but to that point, I mean, what Matt was saying with this Utah squad, they also have a 6'3", center that is kind of tough and can get you some buckets. She's from France. I don't know how to say her name or how to pronounce it, but she's really tough. I think she dropped 24 in that game versus Iowa State. And I mean, if you compare what, like you just said, what Audie Crooks does, she dropped 29 versus Utah, but this young lady is no slouch in her own. So it's going to be fun to see the dynamic of who's guarding who, and because I think she's a little not a slight frame. I mean, she's tall, but she's not necessarily that back to the basket like Audie Crooks is, where Yoki can guard that pretty well. Like that's kind of her defensive matchup that she likes to guard. We'll see what they do with this young lady, and on the road, like Matt was saying, it's going to be one of those tough outs, but it's one of those that you have to win to get onto your resume where you're like, okay, this team is legit. Because what are we ranked right now? I think we're like 12.
12.
I think one of these kind of games, with teams that are playing in front of you, if they slip up, you can pole vault yourself pretty far into the rankings. And when it comes time for the madness, I think these are the games that they go back and look at and like, hey, they deserve to host.
Well, I just want to add this real quick. I mean, the Big 12 this season lost Texas and Oklahoma, who Texas historically was one of the best women's basketball programs. Oklahoma this season, I believe, is top 10. I think they're 10th right now. Those would have been two really big opportunities to basically pick up, top 10 wins against those schools. The Big 12 women's programs this season, like Iowa State has been disappointing. Obviously, TCU has been the big one. TCU last season, I believe, also started 11-0. Like they started off the season very well. They had that bout with players injured and et cetera, and we didn't get to play TCU last year. But these opportunities are going to be how this team is going to move up in the rankings, because it's been pretty obvious that the Big 12 has not gotten really much respect amongst the national media with regards to women's basketball this season. TCU and K-State have very much stagnated to be in the 10 to 12 ranking range and in the AP poll and in the coaches poll. For K-State to move up in the rankings, if you want to move up quickly, you have to win a game like the Utah game on Wednesday night. I'll compare it a lot to the Baylor game last season. K-State, very highly ranked, but you're going on the road for one of your first big games for the season. And I know Baylor and Utah are kind of at different levels from a program, just historical perspective, but Baylor was a top 15 team that we were playing last season. You have a top 25 team now that you're going to go on the road. You have to find a way to win this game if you're Jeff Mitty, to keep the respect that you have, because you're not going to have a lot of these types of games this upcoming schedule. just got to hope that they can pull it out. You can execute, and you can leave Salt Lake City with a win.
Maya Toure is the pronunciation guide.
Yeah, she's tough in the post. I think she's what's the young lady that we have? Oh my god, I'm blanking. I'm terrible with the women's basketball's names. I'm just
Who we have
yeah.
in the post? Kennedy Taylor.
No,
Are we talking about, or Eliza Maupin?
She's more of a wing now. She used to kind of play the post. Hold on, who did you say?
Eliza Maupin.
Yeah. She reminds me of her. Maybe not as athletic as Maupin, but this lady is a really good, slender kind of post player that can take Yoki away from the basket. And I think what Iowa State did last year when Crooks wasn't out there is kind of similar to what I think they would try to do against Yoki, and what basically everybody tries to do against Yoki when they don't have a post player with the size to match Yoki.
I do just quickly. I don't think anybody mentioned Jalen Glenn's name, but she was recently awarded, or not awarded. She made her 1,000-point career point at K-State. She's been someone who's been here for a long while in this program, and she's been she is a steadfast player and a true starter for this program, averaging 31 minutes a game. She's the second best three-point shooter on the team, shooting almost 39%. Excellent defender. She's been really, really good, and she's developed. It's kind of hard to believe that, all these players have just shown marketed improvement this season off of a team that was a top 15 team last year. And it just shows how good Jeff Mittie has been in developing this team and getting them ready for Big 12 play. I'm excited. I hope this team not just hosts. I've said on this show, I think this team can make it to the Final Four. I really do.
Yeah.
They just have to continue to develop. They have to execute. They have to win games on the road, hold serve at home, and hopefully get a good matchup in the NCAA tournament as well.
And I think a young lady like Tamira Poindexter is one of those players that can really, is one of those players that can make the very top echelon of teams better. And she's one of those, athletically, she can guard a multitude of positions. If she could get a little bit better from the field and scoring the ball, especially when those games where Yoki is getting double teamed and she has to kick out, she's athletic enough to get to the basket and get to the rim and score the ball. I think she's one of those ladies that really vault this team to that upper echelon, those Final Four kind of teams. But we have to see it from her. I'm really excited for her because she was one of my favorite additions to this team this offseason. I'm hoping that she can really take her game to the next level. I think she's averaging like 12, but if you watch her, she's got so much more in her bag than really what she's shown so far. I'm excited to see where she goes.
In general, this is a really good week for women's basketball too. You've got a lot of top 25 matchups you've got USC Maryland, that's on Tuesday night. You've got
who's UCLA playing?
UCLA has a matchup against
their one.
I just saw that they were playing someone. I think Maryland.
They're scary, dude.
You've got LSU, Tennessee. You've got South Carolina playing Texas. Alabama's playing Texas.
UCLA versus USC is the one that I don't know when it happens. I don't know when you got to look it up, but that's the one I might call off of work for that one.
It's been cool to see the women's basketball renaissance. I think it helps that you have a team that is in the top 15.
Absolutely.
That's important, but the sport has done a really good job of really putting their stars in full front. This season, Juju Watkins, Paige Beckers, and you kind of go down the list. There's so many really good women's basketball players that are out there. And what women's basketball does an excellent job of is the best programs will go out and play programs from another conference in the non-conference. Yeah. They'll do it during the middle of conference play.
South Carolina plays UConn in February, like February 16th.
South Carolina plays everybody. They don't care.
Yeah. South Carolina, deservingly, they play everybody and they whoop up on everybody except for UCLA. Yeah.
That game, USC versus UCLA is the day before. I think that's Valentine's Day, February 13th. So it's going to be a while until we see both these teams. But that is the team that that matchup. That's a top 5 matchup right now. I'm pumped for that game, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think just something for everybody like who listens to our show, and we are very lucky to have a great following. But if you haven't watched the women's basketball team, they are a team that kind of putting some effort in to watch this team is well worth your time. They put a really good product out there for women's basketball. Jeff Mitty's building a really great program. They've got excellent recruits coming in as well, if you've kept up with that. So I know we have some women's basketball fans that do watch or listen to the show. So I mean, I just want to give them their props. You know, they've done an incredible job this season. 15-1 is nothing to sneeze at whatsoever. And I mean, this could be a team that, ends the season, with 2 losses.
Wouldn't it be fun if we get, the one thing against K-State is that we don't have a national. If women's basketball brings it in, they deserve, I don't know what K-State could honor these young ladies with, but they got to give them everything.
Aggieville that
they got to give
a certain other coach of another team in Manhattan was saying was going to happen at some point. So Mitty's going to get it first.
I mean, I really think the ceiling for this team is a Final Four, just depending on your matchup. And, you do see it. The parity for women's basketball has shifted a little bit. Obviously last season, I think you could say the 2 best teams probably made it to the national championship game. But you've seen these teams make it to the Elite Eight, some here recently, you have top 4 seeds that make it to, or top 4 seeds make it to the Final Four. You have top 8 seed lines making it to the Elite Eight. I mean, the parity has been kind of changing for women's basketball, and it's an exciting sport to watch. It's a different type of basketball, but that takes nothing out of the skill level. I mean, the skill level is just kind of incredible.
I mean, from my perspective, watching more women's game, there's less fouling. It's almost more strategic as opposed to I'm just gonna drive in a lane and bully ball my way to the basket. It's just
some people don't like that because I love a good foul.
you love your fouls, but it does just almost seem almost a little bit more cerebral in how they approach the game in a lot of ways. So it's definitely a different type of basketball watching for sure. Moving on to the men's side, this team is 7-6 overall through 13 games, or 1-1 in conference play. The good news is last week, K-State got a big win against a ranked opponent in Cincinnati, which was the first team with a pulse that K-State played all season and got a win against. So that was fun. That was fun.
I got a win against. I thought you were saying in general the first team.
That got a win against.
Yeah.
Coleman Hawkins has looked better. He did have a very good performance against Cincinnati. We finally have seen starts from Doug McDaniel the past 2 games because God told Coach Tang to start him, apparently.
Actually told him the opposite. I mean, begrudgingly, he kind of leaned into it. What did he say?
He said there was a different translation of the Bible verse they used for Shark Week. His assistants told him, hey, maybe you should think about starting Doug. Something about the Bible verse spoke to him, and he said God told him to start Doug.
Okay, I read it the wrong way. I thought God was telling him, hey, he didn't deserve it. But I guess God is saying that some people don't deserve things, but they still should get it.
Yeah, I don't know. All of that's to say,
hey, shout out to Tang, man.
We finally have had starts from Doug, who apparently doesn't get along well with the head coach. We've got Buddy Rich, who's starting to come on. I mean, he didn't score any points against Cincinnati, and he's still a project. I think is being generous when we're looking at it from a defensive perspective, but he started to come on. He's getting more minutes. He's starting to get some buckets in there. Had 20 points against Wichita State. He had 8 against TCU, and you had a matchup against the only team, who's ranked lower than you in the net is coming up. Is going to be happening on Tuesday this week. So I'll drop this episode tonight. That game's tomorrow against Oklahoma State. They're 8-5 overall. They're 0-2 in conference play. They've lost to Houston 60-47 and West Virginia 69-50, which granted, those are two pretty damn good teams that are very well thought of nationally, especially West Virginia with Coach DeVries going in there and getting, arguably the best transfer portal point guard who happens to be his son. So those are good things. The bad things are, and Matt, I'll let you speak on this a little bit more, but the team had a 62-56 lead in the final 3 minutes and 14 seconds of the game against an unranked TCU team who is probably going to be one of your 2 to 3 easiest chances to get a road win in conference play this season. They went scoreless in the final 3 minutes. They had the ball with 10 seconds left and drew up a play, missing a layup. And then the team played volleyball for the final 5 seconds after the shot went up and lost the game 63-62. You had 5 free throw attempts to TCU 16, and you shot 21% from beyond the arc. So that was the bad. But Matt, you were at the game. I would love to hear from you. I mean, what would the final 3 minutes were like, just in general, maybe speaking, wire to wire, what was the game like? I don't know.
Well, what was the game like? You can take a few positives out of the game. The rebounding in this game was really exceptional. I mean, David Gasson had, I believe, 17 rebounds or 14 rebounds in the first half alone in that game. It's just taking the rebounds and doing something with it. They obviously just shot so poorly in the first half, but your rebounding and your defense was halfway decent enough to put you in a position to where you could get a lead in the second half. Now, I just want to explain to everybody the last 3 minutes of this game. So after a Max Jones 3-pointer with about 3 minutes and 15 seconds to go, he makes a 3. TCU goes down. They miss a 3. We take it back. We miss a 3. No surprise there, considering the rest of the game. But TCU brings it back, makes a 2. Doug misses a shot. Doug gets a rebound, misses the front end of a 1-and-1. TCU comes down, makes a 3. Coleman Hawkins misses a layup. Coleman Hawkins makes a block. Great defensive play on a TCU player. Blocks it directly into David Gasson, who then misses the front end of a 1-and-1. And then TCU comes down, makes a layup, and you put together a play with 9 seconds to go that goes nowhere. The last 3 minutes were really obviously very bad from the offensive perspective, but that's no different from the first half that we saw. Can't make a 3, and we didn't execute on, a couple plays, and then you're missing your free throws, which David Gasson has improved his free throw percentage in 2024 compared to last year by, I think, 10%. But your point guard missing a free throw is very inexcusable. And for the way that he shoots the 3-point free throws, you have to improve on that if you want to be the quarterback of this team. But the last 10 seconds of that game were very much like a disaster class in what we've seen throughout this season. You inbound the basketball, but you call a timeout before you get to the half court line. That instantly puts you at a disadvantage because you're going to have to inbound the basketball for the most part, much behind, the half court line, to where you're putting your point guard at a disadvantage because he's going to have to come and run up and get a play going with basically 7 seconds to go. You have to, even if it's the coaching staff not calling the timeout, you have to instruct your players that if we give up a basket here, you're not instantly calling a timeout. You're getting the ball to your side of the court to try and drop a play. But the last play of the game was something that Doug McDaniel had been doing in the game, which was getting by the defender and putting up a shot. He had, I want to say, probably 3 or 4 field goals in that game that very much included him driving by the defender and getting up to, make a play. But I think the struggle with that is that type of play works if you believe you're going to get another possession in the game. I think it was a big mistake trying to assume that on the last play of the game, that's going to be the thing that's going to get you a victory. Um, but I, there was nothing different in the last 3 minutes of that game that I haven't seen for a majority of this season, and it's lack of execution from the player perspective. And I think it's just some of these coaching decisions that you're making that aren't putting your players in a position for success. Um, and it starts at the top. I think one of the biggest issues that we're finding here is we don't have an X's and O's guy right now who is doing a good job of getting this team ready and making adjustments in game. I just don't. The offensive side has been a really big disappointment this season, especially with the type of players that we have. Do you put all of that in Rodney Perry's kind of wheelhouse as a guy who we thought, I think, was going to have some of the offensive, kind of masterminding here? I don't know. But this team just struggles with coaching. You just see it and what they put out there. I think we have the talent. I really do. I think Doug McDaniel in the past 2 games, the Cincinnati game, he looked excellent. In this TCU game, he missed shot. Like everybody was missing shots in the first half. But the second half, you see these moments of why he's out there. He provides energy. He has these spurts on offense to where he has that speed. He can get to the lane and make some of these shots. But it's everyone around him, and you have guys standing around. You don't have like this offensive cohesion. And so you're putting it on Doug McDaniel and you're putting it on Coleman Hawkins to try and make a play. And so that's where I just see, like, we have the talent out there. I don't think the coaching is there. And we know we're going to have Jerome Tang next year. Anybody who thinks otherwise is just completely misguided. He's got an $18 million buyout. The coaching staff's going to have to change. It really is. And we're saying it less than halfway through the season, but he's going to have to make some adjustments on the coaching side in 2025 to make people feel like there's something going on here, because this team has obviously shown, or this coaching staff has obviously shown the ability to recruit or so, bring in talent. I'm saying, like, Coleman Hawkins, everybody talks about Coleman Hawkins and how much money he makes. I think he's made his money the past couple weeks, or, he's done a good job. I think Doug McDaniel's been there. He shows the talent. And I think we have the talent around that could put this team where they need to be to make the NCAA tournament. I just don't think the coaching's there. I just don't.
I also don't think the coaching is there. You broke the game down perfectly. There's really not much else more to say. You could go schematically, like who needs to be out there on that last defensive possession. If you know that if you can get a defensive stop that there's going to be fouls, why is David Gasson out there? But he is also one of your best defenders. But realistically, the guys that he was guarding was a true freshman that was not going that wasn't getting the ball. Punch, I think that was his name. He wasn't going to get the ball. Buddy Rich had done a fine job on him, and Buddy Rich shoots from the free throw line 30% better than he does. So if you do get a stop, he is one of those players that could possibly get the ball to shoot free throws. You did lay out there that Doug McDaniels also miss a 1-and-1, and he's supposed to be one of the guys that can finish games for you. I think that's a lot of what Marquise Noel did when he was here. He absolutely ended ball games because you could not foul us because we just would bury games. It is tough watching this offense, especially the difference you see when, no offense to Coleman Hawkins, because his last 2 games have been his better games, but when Coleman Hawkins is not out there, the offense does move a little bit better. I think Coleman Hawkins can find assists, but I think in terms of spacing, because Coleman Hawkins takes the ball, he has to be a perimeter player. He's not a post player. He's not. In my opinion, when he posts up, it's damn near at the 3-point line every time I see it. It's not like he's trying to get back to the basket and bury guys down there, even though he might be 4 inches taller than them. But when you saw how we took the lead, that was when Coleman Hawkins was on the bench with foul trouble, and then when Coleman Hawkins came in, I know you could disagree, Matt, and it's just correlation. It's not necessarily what happened, but you just see what happens when he's out there. The ball is a little stagnant. He wants to dribble drive. He wants to beat a center, and it's a good idea because they kept Uday out there. I think that's his name. They kept him out there guarding him at the top of the key, and Coleman Hawkins realistically should be able to beat him every time, but it just doesn't seem to happen, and that's what happens when you're a player-led team and there's no schematic to the offense. Like you were saying, there's no X's and O guy that's drawing up a play, and we've been saying that forever. And Bob laid it out for years. He's a roll the ball out there kind of coach, and that there could be no problem with that than when you have playmakers that can get you a bucket. But Doug should be that guy, but he's not a consistent enough guy to do it. Coleman Hawkins, not that guy. Like Matt, you said at the beginning of the year as well. He might be the second leading scorer, but realistically, he's not. He shouldn't be that guy. He should be a facilitator. He should be a rebounder. He should be starting fast breaks. He shouldn't be the one that's playing point guard at the top of the key when the game is on the line. It shouldn't be that way. So you got to draw up plays for your other guys, but your other guys aren't killers either. So,
I mean, I think the key with Coleman Hawkins is this, and my thought process of what he should be out on the court. You take the NIL piece of the puzzle out of it, because unfortunately that skews everything, and that's not his fault. That's how his services were rendered in the market. Like, this is what teams wanted to offer a guy like him in the market. But I look at him as a secondary point guard who happens to be 6'10". In the TCU game, he was 11-7, 11-7. He had 4 assists. But he's a guy who, like, from a passing perspective, he has really great court vision out there. And having him as kind of a secondary point guard, your hope is that your main point guard can do things off the ball so that you don't have 2 main point guards out there on the court. And the thing that we're finding is Doug McDaniel, I think, excels at being a main point guard, having the ball in his hands, but finding others open or cutting to the basket and putting up a floater or getting by the defender and putting a layup in. And Doug McDaniel's not showing the ability to be an off the ball guard like maybe I would have expected.
So basically you're saying, not to cut your point off because I want you to get back to it because you're absolutely crushing it, but if Tyler Perry was the guy instead of Doug McDaniels, maybe this would be a better team.
It is very funny that you mentioned that, because I think it would. But then you're putting, is Tyler Perry a better main point guard than Doug McDaniel? Main point guard, your number one point guard. I'm going to say no. I don't think so.
No, but
it's the overall.
In spurts, that's what you kind of need, especially when you have a Coleman Hawkins out there.
Sure, yes.
And if Coleman Hawkins is a facilitator, and if he's relied on to get you a bucket every time, it's just not going to happen. And it's also not necessarily that he's a bad player on the offensive side, because he has a bag. He can get you some. He can get to the rim, especially when he's matched up on fives and stuff like that. But it's the lack of focus, I think, a lot of the time from this team when we've got the ball in our hand and it's time to execute. So many blown layups, so many just short-sighted things where we're not thinking like, dunk the basketball, dunk it. You're 6'10", dunk the basketball. There should be no reason why Coleman Hawkins is laying the ball in and going back iron. It just should not happen.
And I was just going to say, the TCU game, he was 5 of 14 shooting, which everybody was really bad from a shooting perspective. Sure. I mean, the second half, we ended up shot 39% in the game, and a lot of it was because of the second half, and we shot 0.2% worse than TCU in the entire game. I mean, it is crazy, in the second half how this team kind of adjusted and made some plays on the offensive end. But Coleman Hawkins was 5 of 14 in this game. There were 3, 4, 5 more attempts that I think he should have taken in this game that were kind of wide open shots at the perimeter. And the unfortunate thing I say with that is, like, at one point in this game, and I think, from a half perspective, like, we were 3 of 20 at the half or something like that. We had 30 total attempts. This team is not built to have 66% of your attempts be threes.
No,
it's not.
It's funny because we really did set our minds on trying to improve our 3-point percentage, but it's the way we're playing is just not conducive. We are a better team if we would go downhill, foul the hell out of teams, and just try to play defensive scrappy teams. But I don't think this team is bought in enough to just be nasty and just be those junkyard dogs and play deep enough where we're going to foul the hell out of everybody and play defense and then try to scrape by on wins. Because you see, if we're actually hitting threes, we're nasty, but it's just so inconsistent. You're going to lose too many games doing that.
Yeah, I mean, like, kind of as I was saying, like, Coleman Hawkins, I think, should have taken like 4 more 3 attempts in this game.
He shoots like 20%.
Based off of the fact that he was kind of wide open with this shot. He's somewhat of an unselfish player, if you think about it, which puts it into perspective of the junkyard dog mentality that you're saying, which when I hear that, you think of like Frank Martin's teams, etc., like these guys that were hard-nosed and all of this type of stuff. I don't think a Jerome Tang coach team is going to have that type of mentality. I would argue, like 2 years ago, I don't think that was a junkyard dog mentality. I think you have like high personality guys, but they weren't obviously fouling all the time, or, they weren't like digging into the lane all the time. Like, that was
But we were a hell of a lot better defensively.
But we were better defensively, yes. This team is 100% built, to try and score. And they're just not doing that at the clip that they need to. And I was just kind of shocked in the first half, when you're taking that many threes, TCU's giving you threes for a reason. Like, you're not making these shots really until the second half. And I think in the second half, they made 4 threes or something like that. And it wasn't even, something crazy. I think they were just like 4 of 8. So I don't know. The overall thing with this game, TCU is not a good team.
No,
I'm not saying that disrespectfully.
They're hurt. No,
they're hurt there. They're hurt. Trey White, we were on Trey White. He would have been, he was a very good, player for this team.
Uday is another guy that we were kind of in on there for a minute, and he ended up going TCU as well.
Yeah. He would have been a very weird fit for us. He's a very weird fit for them.
He would have been playing the role.
Vashon Alette was a guy that we were in on. The biggest thing that I noticed with TCU is they had more grit at the end of that game. I mean, they were a grittier team. They were effective, obviously, in making some shots. And this was a really big game that we should have won, because it kind of changes a little. I'm not saying it changes the total trajectory of what your expectations are for Big 12 play, but winnable games on the road, if you can take advantage of those, that's going to be very helpful. If you can win 7 of your 9 home games, that means you're going to upset some teams at home. If you can win 7 of your 9 home games, and you can win half of your, games on the road against the lower level competition in the Big 12, that puts you in the potential conversation, no matter how bad your non-conference was.
But now this, looking forward to probably close this out, this makes the game at Oklahoma State an absolute must win.
Yeah.
You lose that game, I don't know where you go from here. There's no diagramming what we could do this way, that or that way. You have to win that game in Stillwater.
Yeah. And I think honestly, I think you have to beat them by 10 to 15 points at a minimum, because this is the one team ranked below you in both Ken Palm and the net.
Just win at this point.
It's just, I mean,
you have to.
If you had an opportunity to come out of this stretch 3-0, going into a matchup against Houston that you get at home, and where you could maybe have rode the momentum of a 3-0 start to conference play against a number 12 team in the country at home with your home crowd, and that's totally squandered. And
I think you could still get that from the home crowd if you get the win at
Sure.
Oklahoma State. Houston's going to be a totally different beast, and I mean, let's get through this game first, and then we can maybe next time we talk about basketball, we can start talking about chunks of schedules and 4 game stretches and stuff like that. But
because it's brutal. It's brutal.
There's no way around. There's no way around it that if you don't win this game, the season is over, and we can spark those lighters up and hit those candles real quick, Bob, if you want the next episode.
You heard it here first. We're going to win the Houston game.
Damn.
We're going to win the Heuston game.
I like that. But
what about Oklahoma State, Matt?
Oh, damn. Not so confident. I don't like that.
Here. I'll give 15 seconds. I'll just say, I think this team eats up a home environment. Like, that's their MO. I really think home environment brings out the best in this team. Cincinnati is, I don't think, very good. Houston's obviously going to be better than Cincinnati, but I think the Houston game is going to be a low scoring game. I think I do. I actually think we match up compared to last year pretty decent against Houston at home. I think we actually will win this game. It's sad because I'm putting a lot of eggs in this basket.
No shed this year. So that's, I mean,
yeah, I don't know. For some reason, I just think that, and I have actually felt this. I thought, even no matter what the TCU game, I thought after the Cincinnati game, this team just looked different at home. They just looked like they had just this different energy, that they kind of soaked in, especially in a holiday break game. And now you're going to bring in, the 11th ranked team in the country. I think this team eats off that energy, which is why games on the road are going to continuously be a struggle for them. And so that's why I think they're going to pull it out.
And to cap it off here, I'm just going to go through, we went through the good and the bad. I'm just going to share some of the ugly real quick, because I got to get out here in 4 minutes anyway. But it's K-State's worst start since the Jim Woolridge era, so that's great. 115th in the net. That's the second lowest team in the net in the Big 12 out of 16 teams. Oklahoma State is below, so you have an opportunity to beat a team that is considered worse than you on Tuesday night. They're 86th in Ken Palm. So Ken Palm actually has given this team a lot more credit, I think, throughout the year. I think the Cincinnati win is helping inflate that a little bit, but you're 4th lowest in Ken Palm in the conference. You've got Colorado, Utah, and Oklahoma State below you. This is the longest road losing streak actively in the nation right now. K-State has lost 12 straight games on the road going back to last season. Going to be interesting to see if they can snap that against Oklahoma State. And then finally, this is also the second straight season that K-State has had a player dismissed from the team before conference play. So just a lot of interesting storylines. Not all of them are very good. If I think most of them are pretty bad, but it's going to be interesting to see how this team can go on the road, maybe snap that losing streak against the one team worse than them so far in the conference. And you've got some fun matchups ahead against Texas Tech and on the road at Allen Fieldhouse. And it's just going to get really interesting from here on out, which is this is the gauntlet that we all knew the Big 12 would be. But that's going to do it for us today. Once again, shout out to our sponsor, Annie Mae's Parlor. Visit them at anniemays.com to get a full list of their upcoming events. That's Auntie, A-U-N-T-I-E, Mays, because I realize some people probably hear me say Auntie Mays and think I'm saying Annie Mays, like Annie, like Annie's mac and cheese or something. And if you're stopping by Annie Mae's Parlor, be sure to tell them Cocaine Willie sent you. Additionally, we are the K-State representative on the College Huddle, which is the largest community of fan-driven content in the nation. Check them out at thecollegehuddle.com and follow them on social media at College Huddle. And last but not least, you can follow the show at Cocaine Willie on YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, Blue Sky, or Instagram, or follow us individually. I'm at Bob Trollsby. Chef is at Chef Andre Napier, and Fireball Matt is at Matt Marchesini. Chef.
Cocaine's a hell of a drug, baby.
We are all Coke, and sometimes we joke, but Wildcat Country, let's ride.
Let's ride.
Let's go.